This podcast is brought to you by lineupmedia.fm.
Because if you can tell me what your habits are, I can tell you what sort of a person you are. I can tell you what your future looks like.
But like I always say, life is 10% what happens to you, it's 90% what you do about it.
The people who are most effective in the workplace believe that their future is going to be bigger than their past. When people don't believe that their future is going to be bigger than their past, they begin to disengage.
You're listening to The Circuit of Success, a podcast dedicated to helping you achieve success in every facet of life. Only on the lineupmedia.fm podcast network. Now, your host, Brett Gilliland.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland. Today, I've got Timm Chiusano. How you doing, Timm?
I'm doing excellent, Brett. How are you today, my friend?
I am doing well, man. It is good to be with you. I got introduced to you, of all things, on TikTok. My kids got me on TikTok. I don't know anything about TikTok. I'm still learning it, as we probably all are in our age group, our demographics, right? But then my buddy from college, my roommate, guy was in my wedding, Ryan Gottner, sends me a message, sends me your profile. I was like, dude, you got to watch this guy. You guys have a lot in common. So, and now here we are.
It's the magic of TikTok. And for the record, I'd like to say that I don't quite know what I'm doing there either. Just started somewhat on a whim, and next thing I know, I'm having a conversation with you. So, the world is a good place.
The world is a good place. You are in New York City. I think just to your right, my left is probably all the tall buildings out there.
I get to see all the redwoods and the pines here in lovely Manhattan, which are the 40 plus story and 115, I think that one is. That's basically just outside my window here. Yeah.
Well, I'm in a 5-story building, and I think there's a 5-story hospital right there, and then that's about it. So we're all good, man. So why don't you maybe give our listeners a little bit of the background, who Timm is, and what's made you the man you are today. You work with, you lead 240 employees. You're a creative executive at a Fortune 100 company there in New York, and so you don't just wake up and get to do that, but here you are, man.
You don't just get to wake up and do that. Sometimes I feel like that's what happened because of how fast things can go. And sometimes I actually giggle in meetings. I'm like, I can't believe anybody's taking me seriously now. Like, aren't I still the guy who's working 4 part-time jobs at the same time to even try to get my foot in the door to begin with? But that's kind of what makes it fun. So I started my career with ABC Sports back in 2000. Really coming out of school, I was doing a little bit of production work. I was doing a little bit of work for a not-for-profit company to try to get some quote unquote marketing experience, which I was really just kind of getting any experience underneath my belt, as everybody does once they get out of school. I was a substitute teacher, really just doing anything I could get my hands on. Did that for a couple of years, finally got a break with ABC Sports to be one of their production assistants for their college football seasonal agreements. Basically, they bring in like 16, 20 kids and say, hey, here's a college football crew that you get aligned with. You do all the logistics work. You do some of the on-air graphics work too, the score bug, right? The thing that's got the clock and the game score. So really rudimentary stuff from a live TV perspective, but that's where it all began, so to speak. I was one of just a couple that they ended up keeping after that first season and worked with their PGA golf crew. Did that for about 5 years. Loved it. Loved the space. Being live sports production was a really, really, really fun, especially, one of your first real jobs out of school, working on the PGA golf crew for ABC Sports. You're basically chasing the summer around the globe, right? You start in January in Palm Springs. By the summertime, you're back in the Northeast. In the fall, you're in, Vegas and in Florida. And it was great, but it was a lot of travel. It was 36 weeks a year. But I cut my teeth very quickly relative to pressure and communication and all that kind of good stuff, because you cannot mess up on air. You have to be extraordinarily well-versed communicator, so to speak, because you got 8 voices in your head while you're on air, and you need to be like really, especially golf. Golf, you think, is kind of the sport that you put on and you take a nap to. But on the other side of it, it's actually like producing 8 football games at the same time because everybody's playing at different paces, right? And got married when I was 27. And right after that, I'm like, I cannot be on the road for 36 weeks a year and try to have a reasonable marriage. So what do I do next? I managed to luckily pivot my career to ESPN and their marketing team. I had no marketing background, but basically followed a popcorn trail of where do all these sponsorships come from? Like, I get the paperwork that says, Tim, make sure that you're not forgetting about the shot of the day brought to you by AstraZeneca or, Buick's flashback type of stuff. But where does that actually come from? Like, I need to get to the business side of things now. I'm 27 years old. I just got married. I can't live this kind of vagabond life on the road as much as I love it and as fun as it is. How do I pivot? Figured out a way to kind of sell myself in as you teach me the marketing, I'll teach you guys the production side, because I saw this big divide where sales wanted to sell everything. Production didn't want to do it. They're like, just leave us alone and let us do the telecast. I was like, I'll be the in-house diplomat. I was raised on the production side. I understand the business side. I know I have good ideas. I can be that conduit. And that worked. Spent 7 years with ESPN, worked on everything outside of their college sports stuff. So Sports Center, NASCAR when they had it, IRL, PGA again, NFL, NBA, ESPYs, like you name it. And I probably touched it at some point. Yeah. And again, it was for all of those sponsorships. So Toyota halftime show and Starting Lineups brought to you by, we were the in-house team that helped figure out, all right, IBM wants to spend X amount of dollars. NFL is a good spot for them. Let's work with a production team and come up with what is a great idea that's going to really reel them in to spend all their dollars on sponsoring Sunday NFL Countdown. Did that for 7 years. And then one day I was walking down Columbus Avenue and I got an email from an old boss that said, hey, I'm landed at a place called Time Warner Cable Media, and we need somebody with a production background that's willing to, take on a task that probably not a lot of other people are willing to be taking on. I was like, ooh, it's a vice president job. I could be a vice president by the age of 35 at a big company. Like, that sounds cool. Chased it down. And the role that I'm in now was that role. Companies have changed through mergers and acquisitions, but basically what I was tasked with doing was taking local production for local cable advertising and creating basically a center of excellence, and having what was at the time a 100-person team, pulling that all together. So it wasn't like little one-offs in tiny little offices or even big offices like New York and LA. How do you take all of those production people out there that are now doing creative for small businesses for the purpose of getting those small businesses on TV? How do you make that truly a center of excellence again, so that best practices are shared, et cetera? So we are the reason, if you're watching NBA on ESPN tonight, and it goes from a Coors Light commercial to, your local Bob's Toyota, we are the creative agency behind the local Bob's Toyota, right? Those are all sold locally usually by cable entities that are selling the airtime, but those businesses don't have creative agencies. So a lot of people are like, wait a minute, you're leaving ESPN to go do what? But I'm as a passionate New Yorker, you would think the opposite, that I'm all about big business and all that kind of stuff. But New York is really just a series of tiny little neighborhoods that are all kind of on top of each other. So I love the idea of what I had learned for the biggest brands in the world. What are the best practices of IBM and American Express and Toyota and Verizon relative to their branding and their creative initiatives? And can I apply that at scale to small businesses and take on a large team and kind of reinvent how that space works? And now I've been doing this for 9 years. The team, through all kinds of different trials and tribulations that would take much longer than probably we have time today to discuss, is now a 240 person creative team. And it's an absolute privilege to do what I do.
That's awesome, man. Well, that's a heck of a run. That's a heck of a run. I like it. I like it. Thanks for sharing. So what are you learning from the I think you called it Bob's Tires, whatever we want to call it today. What are you learning that they can do in today's world with social media, audio, video, podcasts, whatever it may be? What are you learning that those people can do that the big boys and girls are doing as well?
I'd say, it really starts with probably an answer that no one's going to expect, which is storytelling. Right. And what I think local businesses have that no other brand really has is a true person, people first story. Like, what does that business actually mean to the local community? Who are they? How did they open? Why did they open? What is it like when people walk in and people recognize each other's names? Like, that's really powerful stuff. And bringing that to life is truly unique for them. The rest of it is somewhat formulaic to a certain extent, right? Like, how do you have an overarching brand message that then can expand into other places so that there's, strategic cohesion between a message that's on social with a message that's on TV. And I spend most of my time on the people management side of things. So I stand by the answer that I just gave, because I think that's really the secret sauce is the storytelling, and at least having some sort of rigor or approach. But if it's authentic, if it tells a good story, and there's obviously just kind of the overarching need of, can you get people's attention, and do they know what to do after you've gotten their attention? That's all kind of marketing 101. But on a day in and day out basis, part of the privilege of having a 240 person team is I rely on my creative experts to do that work. I actually have very little interaction with our clients on a day in and day out basis. A vast majority of what I do is simply, how do I set up my team in the best way humanly possible so that they can do the best work for our clients. And then at the end of the day, the people on my team get to go home and say, today was a good day. Because as far as I'm concerned, like, if you're doing that, then you're probably checking a lot of boxes, and then KPIs, goals, CAGRs, all that kind of good stuff like that. Just those things start to take care of themselves a lot easier. When you base leadership on that type of mentality.
Yeah. And so let's stay on that for a second. So you working with 240 people and you're in, probably like I am a lot, you're in back-to-back meetings. So what are your KPIs? Those that don't know, key performance indicators, I call them RPAs, revenue producing activities. Like, what are those things for you that you can focus on every single day to make sure you can go home to your wife and kids and say, you know what, I had a damn good day?
Yeah. So a great question. So on an ongoing basis, what we really look at the most is how are we supporting our company, right? So our individual projects are not, they're important, but it's, what is it supporting client wise? There's only a finite amount of resources that we have. This is a really big place at scale. And I don't have the type of resources to be able to facilitate every single client that walks in the door. So,
right.
Are we touching the right kind of business? Is the juice always worth the squeeze, so to speak, right? It's especially when you're doing stuff at scale, it is very easy to fall into the pitfalls of over-servicing where you should not be over-servicing. And how do you truly set up a system so that you are putting the best resources that you have towards the places that are helping out the company the most based on what their overarching superordinate goals may be? And then how are you then solving for the other things at scale with technology, with better process, with better communication, et cetera? So, short of getting into anything that might be a little awkward from just kind of like a general, business perspective, I really, from a KPI sense of things, how much core revenue can me and my team help support? Are we tying back to, and are we being explicit with what we are doing and how that ladders back up to the overall company objectives on a day in and day out and obviously annual basis? And then how can I specifically measure what type of resources are being applied to what type of revenue, and making sure that that's just calibrated in a really smart way so that we are never, again, over servicing where we should not be, because that's the easiest way to either burn things out, abuse resources, or be in a position where it's like, well, this isn't being managed very well. Like, we're spending all of this money to do what? So if you can really make sure that you're crystal clear on what is going to have the biggest type of impact, and then measure that as explicitly as possible, those are the things that we've got a really good trajectory of being able to say, previously on a per person basis, like, these were the things that we could see, and then now be able to see that kind of like, take a nice little hockey stick type of graph relative to, all right, if this is what's really going to help the company, put in some rigors, put in some good process, and see the ROI on a per project basis, so to speak, start to really jump off the charts.
Yeah, that measurement's the key thing too, isn't it? I mean, you can have every great idea in the world, but if you don't measure it, you don't follow up, you don't have that agenda, it's going to fall on deaf ears, isn't it?
I talk a lot about data. I actually kind of like the fact that at the end of the day, you could pull back anything from me relative to creative, and I could have a conversation. I could pretend this entire conversation was, hey, my name's Tim and I work at a cardboard making factory. And I can give you really specific KPIs relative to these things and talk about very similar business objectives at scale, because you're right. It really doesn't matter what the product is. If you can get really smart with the numbers, and this is where it's been fun from a corporate America perspective, so to speak, to get into that back of the baseball card type of conversation, right? Because you can have all of these subjective conversations about who's the best team, who's the best second baseman of all time, all that kind of good stuff. But you get into the data, you get into the facts and figures, and then you can start to look at running a business almost like fantasy football to a certain extent, where it's like, I'm just looking to rack up the points in a really smart way. Obviously, while building a good culture and a good foundation where people are excited about the work and they understand the vision and the objectives, but you get dialed in with the numbers in a good way, and especially when it's reliable and consistent data, and it's actually a really fun side of the job.
Yeah. Well, what do you do? Because I know, again, go back to you lead 240 employees, family, traveling in the city to and from, for work. What do you do to stay in the moment? But also your routines, because I know you get up really, really freaking early. But what do you do from a routine for peak performance?
I make sure that I stay on routine. I mean, as you noted, I get up at 4 a.m., 7 days a week. And that time in the morning is, I couldn't fathom doing what I do. And it's not even necessarily the hours of the day. It's the peacefulness between 4 and say 7 that I get. And I break all the rules in regards to don't look at your screen right away. Don't check email out of the gate, drink water with lemon in it. No, I have, have a decent cup of caffeine, and I sit down and I just simply think about, what do I need to do in 15-minute increments between now and whenever my first meeting is, to be set up for a really solid day. Really simple things like putting my clothes out the night before, all that kind of good stuff. But I really looked at, like, I was a C student. I'm not like, there was nothing about me or my background that was like, oh yeah, this guy's totally going to do blank, blank, and blank.
Yeah,
absolutely not. I could have very easily been the person that sits in the corner that's like, when is this meeting going to be over? I want to participate as little as possible and just call it a day, and go home and watch, reruns of whatever. And God bless it. Everyone does their own thing. And I would never tell anybody to do anything other than what makes them happy. But for me, it is all about routine. It's about consistency. And it's because I love my days. Like, I really do. I live in Brooklyn, New York. I love getting up. I love the fact that my time helps the people on my team, making sure that I get back to everybody. If someone's like, hey, I just did this great project, like, I want you to check it out. I want to have time to actually digest that. I don't want to be the guy that sends the somewhat obligatory, oh, this was great, thanks for sharing, but did you actually digest it? And almost probably to a jarring degree on the other side, I might have questions in return of like, okay, cool. Like, tell me a little bit about blank, blank, and blank. So,
that's your connection time. That 4 to 7 really for you is to connect with your team.
It's for me to connect with my team. It's mapping out the day. It's especially trying to do content for personal reasons at scale. That's time where I might sneak in a voiceover or do a little bit of editing as well. But I will literally look at it in 15-minute windows. 4 to 4:15 is get my butt downstairs, I usually drink pre-workout right out of the gate because I work out 7 days a week. Then sit down, go through my calendar. What emails did I not respond to that I need to respond to? What's sitting in my drafts? Is there anything that's kind of teed up that day? I'm a big fan of putting together agendas for big meetings, even if I'm not necessarily leading the meeting, so to speak. I just in the sake of like trying to keep people on the same page, I'm happy to say, hey, here's some suggested topics that we go through today, because I'm a firm believer in transparency and just putting things on the table and then sorting through them if you're really there just to do good business. I'll do those types of things, and then by 4:45, I'm probably making a gut decision of, do I need more time for work? Do I have 15 minutes to spare to make content? Like, what else do I need to do? I go for about a 2-mile walk sometime between 5 and 5:30. And that's my peace of mind time. Sometimes I'll use it, especially now, like I'm shocked. I'm absolutely flabbergasted that I have the type of following that I now have, which is certainly not a record by any stretch of the imagination, but it's more responsibility, right? It's comments that need to be responded to. It's a community that needs to be engaged with. It's more direct messages in Instagram than I could have ever fathomed ever getting, and to take the time to try to respond and to try to be appreciative of the fact that people will take my content and, repost it and tell other people to go follow me and like that type of stuff. So I'll use the walk for peace of mind and to respond to DMs and that kind of good stuff. Have a couple of friends that I see in the street corner every morning that I say, hey, good morning. And they're just kind of like the old Brooklyn stalwarts that sit in front of the bodega, as it opens at 5:30 in the morning. Go get a good, or at least a decent workout in, make sure I'm home in time so I can spend at least some of the morning with my wife and my daughter for, making a waffle, whatever is required. Maybe I'm doing school drop off that day, and then get my butt here so that I'm at least a handful of minutes here before my first call to fill a glass of water and get a cup of tea, and then, get ready to be thoughtful and, in high speed all day long.
Get the work boots on, and then you go home at night and then spending family time, and then before, bedtime and all that stuff.
Yeah. Dinner. I actually have an alarm set in my calendar for 5:45 that says, it's called TW, LB or something like that, which basically means Timm work-life balance. And the reminder actually says, just go home. You're going to log back on later anyway. It's kind of like a consistent reminder to myself of like, be smart about my time. And there's a lot of days where I will have 5:30 or 6 o'clock meetings, but making sure that I am out of here consistently so that I'm home for dinner with my wife and daughter by 7 o'clock at the latest is critical. And then that time with them between 7 and say 8:30, and then where I'm really able to then add additional time to do everything that I want to do is I don't watch TV. Yeah. So, if my wife wants to enjoy a show or do, have some of her time as well, that's when I'll put the laptop back out, do some of the similar things that I did in the morning, maybe a little bit of content. Maybe I'll do TikTok live for a half hour just to answer questions and try to engage the community. And then I make sure that I'm asleep no later than 10 o'clock, because I think anything less than 5.5, 6 hours of sleep, and then I start to, not be at my best. And if I'm fortunate enough, I wake up again the next morning and I feel good getting out of bed, and I get to do it all over again. Yeah.
And again, I just go back to that. When I ask you routine for peak performance, the answer is routine. I mean, I think of that too. I have a journal I use every single day. And for me, it's the same thing over and over, right? And you do that over a 20-year career, you can wake up and have some success, right? But it's showing up every single day, getting it done, whether you want to do it or not, whether it's going to be 10 inches of snow here, supposedly this week. You still got to get up and do it, even when you don't want to.
I do 1,000% agree, but that's why I enjoy it as much as I do, because especially in those instances, like Saturday morning, it was literally, it feels like 0 out here in New York.
Yeah.
And we had this big snowstorm that maybe it was Sunday morning. Snowstorm had already come. It was 0 degrees out because it froze even further overnight. And to put on a couple extra layers and then to go for a 2-mile, 3-mile walk down to the Brooklyn Promenade and sit there on the bench and watch the sunrise over the skyline Manhattan was amazing. And really all that was just my routine, but my routine my way, right? I think that people don't see that there is a Venn diagram between your pure happiness and routine. My routine is not entirely, but largely predicated on the fact that I love that day. Like the day that I just described, like that is fantastic. If the more often I can do this, and especially when you include some of the things that we didn't discuss, like, which night are we eating fish tacos, like picking up sushi from my favorite takeout place on 47th and 8th Avenue. I love riding the subway. Like I am fascinated by all of the nuances in the day in and day out. In fact, like one of my latest elements within TikTok, partly because I needed new ways to do content at scale, a piece of video or multiple pieces of video every single day over long periods of time, especially with everything else, is not easy to do. And so I started doing what I call this book of appreciation. And they're like 20-second little snippets, and it's about everything. Cause I'm one of those, I call myself, it's like a happy-go-lucky dumbass to a certain extent, right? Where it's like, people are like, the things that other people might complain about, like I can find that random thing that's like, oh, but it's so cool because of blank. And so this book of appreciation gave me an opportunity to call out these less than, picturesque moments, and sometimes very picturesque moments, and just say, this is why I appreciate this thing or this person or this moment or whatever it might be. But that makes the routine that much more special, because, from what I've learned, mindfulness, a big part of mindfulness is the ability to do whatever you're doing and to consistently absorb more and new things, even if it's the same old walk. And I'll do that walk in the same pattern over and over and over again. And there's still things where I'm like, how did I never see that thing on that house? Mm-hmm. Or like, I never noticed that there was a bird's nest there, like that kind of stuff where it's almost like, again, kind of like happy-go-lucky dumbass guy. But then that, for me, that applies throughout the course of an entire day. And then that's really fun. And then that kind of makes all the stress, and also like big picture perspective, right? Like if you're going to do all of this, in my humble opinion, I think that there's a keen awareness that not everybody gets to do this. And of the 7.8 billion people on the planet, not a lot of people are going to have a vast majority of the opportunities and experiences that I will ever get for a multitude of reasons. Right. So if I am doing these things, I have to be aware that I am choosing to do these things. And it's not routine for the sake of like, oh, this is what I need to do to get to where, those types of things. Like, yes, where you're going and what your goals or objectives may be, obviously need to be part of the fuel for the fire. But it's like, if I get one spin on this planet, I'm totally cool with doing these things in this fashion if I'm able to see the type of output and have the type of experiences. And especially if all of that comes then to full fruition in a paying it forward type of manner, making sure that the people on my team are compensated appropriately, making sure that we have the right culture and values within the company, making sure that our belief system is appropriate, making sure that my daughter has what she needs to have good days, which includes as much of my time and attention as possible. So to me, it all becomes like, almost self-fulfilling to a certain extent. And the snowball can just be, more good vibes on good vibes, for lack of a better description.
Yeah. I can't help but think about the circuit of success, hence the podcast we're on right here. But the circuits are attitude, your belief system, your actions, ultimately get your results. Right. And my thought is if I ask you about your attitude, from what I see, obviously we don't know each other and not hanging out socially, but you got a pretty damn good attitude and you choose that, right? You're getting up at 4 a.m. when it's 0 degrees, you can choose to turn the alarm off, roll over and choose not to get up, but you choose to get up, right? That's a good attitude. Your belief system is pretty darn to your core, right? I mean, like I believe in the water intake. I believe in your sleep. I believe in your exercise. I believe in, even though I don't do a good job about this, what we put in our body, right? Good in, good out. Those things, right? Goal achievement, your journaling, your meditation, all those things are a deep belief system. So if I ask you that, what is your belief system that you know now that maybe you didn't know 5 or 10 years ago?
That's a great question. I would say like the core beliefs, I think it somewhat depends on how we're defining beliefs. Like I believe my, maybe not my sole intention, but a large part of why I'm here on the planet is just to be a good human being. And that's being nice, it's being appreciative, and that's doing what I can to create positive energy around me. I don't know that it gets much more complicated than that. And then therefore, if I'm choosing to do the things that I'm choosing to do from a routine perspective, I find the obligation of, if I'm going to do them, then I'm going to do them because they also make me happy. And I feel like a lot of people fall into the trap of, I do these things and then I will complain about the rigors, or I will say for long periods of time, the job is too stressful, where we all have choices. So I believe that part of the beliefs and values comes down to understanding that I am willingly choosing to do all of these things. And yes, some of them are necessary to have the output and the outcome that I would like to have, but these are choices. And if I'm making all of these choices, then I think I would be, part of the language, but I think I'd be a pretty shitty person if I was doing those things and then not being able to show some sense of pure thankfulness and joy on a consistent basis versus anything else. So the routine and the rigor and the beliefs, I think it simply comes back to happiness over everything else, how much we may or may not be able to understand and control that we do have choices, even in situations where we think, well, I had no choice. I had to do this. My boss asked me, I had to do this, blah, blah, blah. If I wanted to right now, and this is an extreme example, but if I wanted to right now, I could literally take off my microphone, walk away from the computer, get on the elevator, go to JFK, get a plane ticket and fly to Dubai. Yeah. I'm not going to, but I think when you start to understand, especially and I've had some really dark periods during my career where I'm like, this is maniacal. Like, I don't know that I can do this much longer, whether it was based off of a boss, a situation, etc. And the thing that I kept coming back to was, as long as I am understanding that I have a choice, I may not like some of the choices that I have, but as long as I'm willing to have the deep understanding that I'm choosing to go back, and I will be able to have, to a certain extent, to your point, attitude is a skill. If I can refine my skill of what my attitude is in the face of these other things and understand that I'm willfully choosing to go back into whatever situation, then I better also bring the right perspective to then try to make things better versus I feel like I'm stuck. And I know that that's way easier said than done, but I firmly believe that you can either self-perpetuate being stuck. And I'm also not going to pretend that I'm a mental health expert by any stretch of the imagination. I know a lot of people deal with some really, really, really serious things that I will never fully be able to understand. So not everybody can just unstick themselves, so to speak. But I think a lot of people don't give themselves enough credit for how they can understand that they get to choose and that they get to set up their own belief system, and that happiness should dictate what you are doing at the forefront. And if you're willing to be okay with those variables, then you can have a lot of fun on a consistent basis. Yeah.
And I'm assuming if I were to go back and look at because I think you're in your 40s like I am, right? I'm 44.
I'm 44.
Okay, perfect. So 1977 by chance?
Yep.
Boom. So if we could go back to the 30 or the 35-year-old Tim and Brett, don't you think we probably would have seen a good attitude then as well, though? Like even when we were on the climb, right before where you're at now, where I'm at now. And I think that's important too, is it's not one of those, oh, I just woke up and now I can be positive, right?
Right.
You got to be positive. You got to have a good attitude. You got to have your belief systems. You got to have your actions, even on the climb, or if you're starting a new business and you're in your 50s, wherever it's at, the focus, that's why it's the first one, that attitude is a choice. I truly believe that of wherever you're at in your life, we have to choose the side that you want to be on. Right. So that's my thought. So anyway, man, this has been a great conversation. I know you have got a busy day, but where do we find more of Tim? Where do we look you up, man?
I can be found on Instagram. I can be found on TikTok. Those are probably my primary vessels for whatever weirdness that I'm putting out there, but always in a positive light with the best of intentions. Absolutely, man. It's awesome. Like I said, I'm glad Ryan Geiner introduced us via, we didn't introduce us. He just said, go follow this guy. And then I sent him a message. He said, get him on the podcast. So he was pumped. We were talking today, man. So keep up the great work. You're doing a huge job here. You're helping people like me and Ryan in St. Louis, and I'm sure people all over the world. Just keep doing what you're doing, man. Really appreciate you being on the Circuit of Success. Thank you for having me on, Brett. I really enjoyed the conversation, my friend.
Tune in next week for another episode of The Circuit of Success with Brett Gilliland on the lineupmedia.fm podcast network. Subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and through our website, circuitofsuccess.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and email any questions to info@circuitofsuccess.com.
This podcast was a presentation of lineupmedia.fm.